Hello, everyone. We're Jan and Lucille, and you might have come here because you wanted to talk to someone or listen to someone from H&M and learn more about social media. Unfortunately, that person can't be here. So now, as the title suggests, you might be listening to something from AI. But let's quickly go back to who we are. Jan and Lucille, we run a small company called 11 Owls, and we help different companies solve data problems. And we do so from a strategically perspective as well from implementing technical solutions and help them get the most of their data. So as I said, our title suggests that today we're going to tell you a little bit about AI, which is really exciting for most companies and which might be why some of you have come into this space. Truth be told, this is also not what's going to be happening. We're going to be talking about a slightly different topic, which is data quality. Now that might be even more anticlimactic to some of you, as data quality is a lot less interesting. It's something that we've been talking about a lot. It's been around a lot. And really, AI sounds a lot more exciting. We believe, though, this is quite different. We're very excited about data quality, and we believe that talking about this for the next 20 minutes will be a lot more valuable to a lot of the challenges you might be facing in your company as well.
So why do we think this is so exciting? So when we look at the problems that the customers that come to us and the clients that come to us face, then we see some of these problems that you see on the slide here. And I think many of you will find these problems to be very familiar. Now, some of these are you want to understand an end-to-end user journey, for example. Or you have marketing campaigns that run across different platforms and you want to be able to analyze them across all of these platforms. Or maybe you have this new AI tool that you want to introduce and you're now looking into getting the most value out of that. Now, our clients approach us because they're having issues implementing all of these cool features. And when we look at why do they fail implementing these things, we realize there's one key thing that they all struggle with, and that is data quality. In fact, 78% of the projects that we do, we can relate to issues related to data quality. Now, data quality is not something new, right? So ever since the dawn of big data, we have been told data quality is something very, very important. Please be wary of data quality. Yet, we're still here figuring out how data quality works, right? So today, we want to invite you in taking a different perspective on data quality. So for the next couple minutes, let's shift our perspective on this topic of data quality.
But let's make sure that we can actually understand what we're talking about. So we brought a real example of a client that we worked with. So let's meet Marketing Molly. Marketing Molly runs the marketing team of an online store, and she's responsible for all marketing campaigns. But right now, she really wants to improve her email campaigns and decide how to better implement those in order to convert more and better users. For that, Molly's really interested in the activities that those users show and how these were acquired through different campaigns. So Molly is lucky enough because her company has a BI team. So she goes to BI Ben, who's precisely in charge for these things. He prepares data and helps the stakeholders get the insight that they need for their roles. Ben's happy to help. He's pretty busy, so he's letting Molly know this is going to take a little bit of time, but Molly's fine, so they start, and Ben starts working. So Ben goes ahead and looks at the different sources where he's going to get the data from that Molly needs. Looking at the example, Ben knows he has to go and get email campaign data, which they currently have in MailChimp, where they run all their campaigns. He's going to need some information about the user, which he's going to be able to find in their CRM that they actually built themselves in the backend. And he's going to drag some user behavior data out of Google Analytics, where they track all their user behaviors. Ben knows he's going to run into some problems, and so he's not really worried when he sees actually the number of total users that he sees in the email campaign tool and the CRM don't add up, but that's fine, he'll work it out. There's some days where he can't find tracking data, but that's also fine. And then he knows that there's some formatting issues where the different systems just store dates and different data types in a different way, and he'll have to convert them and adapt time zones. So Ben starts working, and he goes ahead and he does what he does. He loads the data into the data warehouse, and he starts cleaning it, formatting it, changing the time zones, which is actually what a lot of people, and maybe some of you, also think about when we talk about data quality or clean data, all of the things that the BI team performs in the data warehouse. And then he applies some business logic that Molly has brought to him and builds a report. Now Molly's excited. It took quite a while, but in the end she got her report and she can start working with it. Very quickly after, though, Molly runs into some problems. She looks at the insight and the conversions, but that immediately brings up new questions. She sees how people convert, but she doesn't know what's driving the conversions. Why are they high in 1 week and lower in the next? And what is happening to the people that didn't convert? So she needs more information about what's actually going on that can't be dragged out of the report. Further, she notices those users missing. So she logs into MailChimp and sees all the users that she cannot find in the report. And after all, Molly is starting to doubt what she's actually looking at and whether this report is going to be able to help her at all. So she goes back to Ben, and Ben is a little bit overwhelmed with this. He wants to help, but really, Ben is busy, as BI Bens are, and he also really doesn't know. He doesn't know where the users are and why they're missing. So he goes back and tries to help, but for Molly, this isn't good enough. She doesn't want to wait another week. She wants to be more independent. And also, she needs this analysis to be done by herself. So Molly starts talking to some other managers and other companies that run marketing campaigns and does some online research to find a more flexible solution, and eventually finds a customer data platform. Those tools promise her to give the insights that she's been missing. They promise a 360 view on the user. They promise to be able to be more flexible in the analysis, and to build the segments that she cares about to be synced to the tools that she wants to work with for her email campaigns. So she persuades the company, the management, they buy a CDP, and they start implementing it.
So now guess how Molly's CDP project is going. So she builds some segments, she can send some emails, she's making progress, but 3 months in, and she's still struggling with pretty much the same problem she had before, right? She still has the issue that she can't find users in the CDP that she used to see in Segment. So, what problems do we have here? We have 3 problems. The first one is Ben starts to be frustrated, right? He put in a lot of work. He built the report for Molly, yet Molly can't really use the report. So that's a very frustrating experience for Ben. He can't really provide the insights to his stakeholder that he would like to. Second, Molly now went and purchased a new tool that has mediocre results. So that adds additional complexity to the tool landscape within the organization and, of course, adds additional cost. And then third, we've added yet another report to the vast amount of reports that we already have in our organization. So Ben and Molly sit together and wonder, how did we end up in this situation? Now, when we think about problems like this one, we like to use an analogy that has helped us a lot think about this problem differently. And we think of these problems as iceberg problems. And iceberg problems are categorized by having some parts of the problem space reside above the surface, so that's the visible part of the problem, but some parts of the problem space are submerged below the surface, right? You can't see them right away. So looking back at Molly and Ben, what did they do? They looked at the part of the problem that was very obvious, that was visible to them. Ben took the information he could find, the MailChimp data, the GA data, the data from the CRM, and combined that into a nice report. And Molly, in the end, did something very similar. She implemented the CDP, and well, guess where the data from the CDP is coming from? Well, it's coming from exactly the same data sources. So initially, when they started their journey, they thought, well, we're set up for success, right? We've observed everything we can see, we have taken everything into account, we've cleaned our data, apparently. Yet what we've seen is that their mission in both cases failed, at least partially, right? They were not able to fully answer the question that Molly had. Now, why did it fail? Because they ended up hitting the submerged part of the problem that was not visible to them at first sight. So what is very important now is that we start understanding what is below the surface and what is actually the part of the problem that we need to start addressing. So we did some digging. We looked into Molly's and Ben's issue, and we found a few interesting things. The first one is we found a business process issue. So it turns out that within MailChimp, users could enter user data on a manual basis and thereby edit certain dimensions of a user. Now, that information was not properly propagated to the CRM, hence causing an issue between the CRM and MailChimp, right? That's what Ben realized when he looked at the information from these two systems. Another thing we found was a problem in the tools themselves. So remember, Ben had this issue where he could not find tracking data for certain dates. Well, it turned out that GA was just set up wrong and it didn't properly send the user ID, for example, of a user to GA, and hence he couldn't combine the tracking data with the data from the CRM. And then that kind of leads to the part of the problem that sits above the surface, the one that we are addressing, and that is limited data quality. Now, when we take a step back and look at this from a more general perspective, we find that this holds true for many of the clients we work with and the projects we work on. So what we realize is that if we start thinking about data quality, we need to start thinking about all of these three things, right? The business processes and the tools within your organization will have a direct impact on the quality of your information.
And now, what does that mean for Molly and Ben, and how do they go on? And maybe what does that mean for all the clients that we work with that try to implement some solution and can't proceed the way that they want to? And maybe what does that even mean for some cases where you've been running into problems with your data? We prepared 3 key takeaways from this talk that we would like to give with you and then discuss further with cases that you might inhibit in your work. And the first one is bad news. Data quality is an iceberg problem. We have the interrelation of the processes of your organizations, the tools that you choose to use to foster and enable these processes, and then the data that you drag out of these tools and that you either want to analyze or use to, I don't know, implement some more tools or actually apply these AI solutions that are out there. The next takeaway, though, is the good news. Data quality is an iceberg issue. If we manage to imply this view on data quality, we can start looking at all these different layers and their interrelation and start asking the right questions. So this enables us to go and work with our customers and understand where the fundamental problems come from and address them. And this leads us to the best news, takeaway number 3. All these tools and solutions that are out there are actually really valuable, and they are giving you the solutions that you're looking for. However, they do not solve the fundamental things for you. Every organization needs to get the foundation right and ask these questions in order to be able to use their data, whether it is for tools, your new CDP, some dynamic pricing tool that you might want to use, or an AI solution. So we develop this view and we apply it with every customer that we work with to get the foundations right and help them find solutions that actually realize this competitive advantage that is in the new technologies and foster long-term growth. We're very excited to hear about your cases and your views. Whether there's questions on this talk or some cases that you've encountered in your work, Feel free to ask them now. Feel free to approach us after this talk or even after the e-com. Thank you.
So, thank you. Very interesting presentation. So, what tools do you use to connect analytics to BI if you have this kind of service? And what's the main tools to connect these two platforms?
So for us, it's less a tool question and more a question of what do you need to set up for yourself in order to be able to combine these information in the first place. So I think there's many solutions to this, right? People will build data warehouses where they'll load all the data from different places into and then build reports over that. Organizations build data lakes if you have more unstructured data, or you can use off-the-shelf tools that combine this information. I think the key is less in finding a platform, and I'm sorry because I'm kind of avoiding your question, but the key is less finding the technical means to combine the information, but to find ways to actually ask these questions that we have been going through. So find something that will allow you to answer the question, can I actually combine these two things or not? That's way more important in our experience than actually finding the technical means to then physically combine these two pieces of information.
Do you still want to hear some tools we use? You got the puzzle anyway, so.
Okay, next question gets Haribos. I know you want these. I see you right here. Do you have a question?
Maybe from your perspective, what would be your recommendations to business owners? How can they tailor their data models and like in your perspective from all these problems that they're facing in their daily communication and so on?
I think like this is precisely what we want to foster in your data team. So it depends how big your data team is, right? But let's just assume you have someone in charge, like a head of data, to like go and like before just trying to solve it and make a really complex data warehouse, look at the sources that you implement and look at if you're going too complicated in the data warehouse. So is there something you can solve in, I don't know, let's say Salesforce or Google Analytics as we saw, and then only load it and work with it. So go back and understand the data before trying to solve something.
Yeah, so my question is, in my experience, an issue that often pops up if you have, let's say, multiple data teams working on different things is that technically they might even have the tooling, they might have the processes for their specific stacks in place, but then collaboration becomes an issue. So agreement on data models, some sort of data ownership becomes a thing. And I think that's probably something you have faced in your work because I think it's a quite common problem. So how do you approach these interpersonal issues then? What, in your experience, has worked well, convincing people that collaboration might not actually harm their position within a data organization?
Yeah, should I go? Now, I think the main struggle we've had if we encounter these kind of situations where we realize it's a very, there is no clear ownership of the data, is to very clearly define what department, even what person is responsible for what system in your organization. So if we think back of the example we've had, somebody needs to be responsible for the CRM. Somebody needs to be responsible for MailChimp. And that responsibility does not only include making sure the CRM is up and running and making sure people can log into MailChimp, but that includes owning the data that pops out of these systems. So I think ownership is definitely the number one priority to resolve these issues. And then I think if you take that one step further, now you have all these individual dots of your network, if you will. It's very important to make connections between these dots very implicit. Now, in data terms, we refer to this as data contracts. So you can think of this as like an agreement between two parties. In our case, this would be the CRM and MailChimp, for example. So the owners of these two tools, they agree on what data needs to be exchanged between the two, who owns what part of the data, so on and so forth. So these will then be kind of enforced in a contract, and then you end up with a network that has very clearly defined nodes and very clearly defined lines between these individual nodes.
No, so I'll make it quick. That's a perfect part with the data contracts, but now people might be afraid to sign them because they no longer have a look at the data and might fear that people misuse the data, which would be the positive case, or they don't want to share the data because they feel like it puts their position at risk. So have these issues occurred for you, and what was helpful in, let's say, getting the people a bit more open to the whole, let's say, open source or data sharing idea?
I think in data in general, and that holds whether you have clearly defined roles or not, because I mean, at the end of the day, somebody's going to be responsible for a database that runs somewhere in your organization, is when you start showing these owners what others actually start doing with your data, they have a very different perspective on this whole dynamic, because now they're not only providing some data to some random person that does random stuff with that, but they can actually take ownership in part to what the other person has done with their own information. So I think the key here is create platforms that allow you or allow tool owners and data users to interact with one another, right? So make sure the owner understands what his data is actually being used for, and make sure that the person that uses the data actually feeds back whatever he or she does with that back to the tool owner. So at the end of the day, I think, create these forums and create these exchanges and make them mandatory to some extent, right? These are always the meetings that fall off the table first, but super important.